Eleanor, I have, go ahead.
The question is, who's going to lead the singing next week?
We need two leaders for the next 2 Sundays. I will not be here.
I guess as president, I'll have to appoint somebody.
You didn't say I'm taking roll.
Okay.
And I'm responsible for the PA.
Bruce?
Either Bruce or Ken.
Thank you for Herb and Wayne for being the greeters this morning. Who did the goodies? The Ryberns? John, have you got the basket going? Yeah.
Oh, and Mary brought donuts.
All right. And Alan's over here.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, it was kind of a rowdy bunch this morning. And let's see, we got a couple of birthdays today. And Alice says that Jerry's off celebrating his.
Would you give Jerry's birthday card to him?
Yes, I will.
Do you have a card for Jerry?
Sure do.
Are you gonna give him a cake? And ice cream?
Yes.
He'll be a happy camper.
Tell him happy birthday.
And
All right, dear.
the other birthday today is Dot Weinkoff, and I don't see her. Not
You
here.
got to celebrate them.
Okay, well, they both have the same day for birthdays today. Okay. Barb, do we have any visitors this morning?
In the back row, on this side right here, we have Louise Smith. Welcome. She's coming by invitation of Johnine Pruitt. And she's from Lake Charles. Lake Jackson, I'm sorry. Lake Jackson. That was my error.
Louise was in Lake Jackson when we were there. And she went to Chapelwood and missed a lot of good sermons.
And she remembered him when she saw him. And the last time she saw him, he had brown hair.
Well, I had hair.
And Mary, it's good to see you here.
One more visitor here. I'm back today. My visitor this morning is Sharon Curry. She's been here before. So Sharon is my handy person helping me out here today. So good to be back and visiting with everybody.
And last but not least, let's remember Louise right here today. Okay, do we have any cares and concerns?
Yeah, Julia Papa George is going to have surgery Wednesday morning at 8:30 out at St. David's in Round Rock.
What's the surgery? What kind of surgery?
It's some kind of surgery. She's been having trouble with this for quite a while.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, I've been asked to make sure a couple of clipboards get passed around this morning. Looks like we're due to get some greeters. So I'm going to sit this out here. It belongs to lady back there, Ms. Freeman. She says she has no threats. But you better sign up.
No threats.
Oh, Mr. Allen.
Okay, we have one more, Alice.
Okay. Let Alice stand up on her new knees. We do not have anyone signed up except for Mr. Ken in May the 27th. So please sign up, and if you would like, take a sticky note as a reminder. But I will certainly call you the day before you're to pray to remind you.
We have goodies on the 13th.
Mary?
May.
I wanted to thank everyone for your cares and concerns and your cards and all that has, the telephone calls.
May
It's
27th.
been wonderful, not my hospitalization part, but the fact that each time I looked at that card or that, I thought of you. And thanks God for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Okay, Jim, you have an announcement?
Yes. No, are you gonna make it?
No, I'm gonna let you make it, I got another announcement.
Okay, well, you go first.
Good morning. On behalf of the social committee, we would like to start signing up for the Round Rock baseball game, which is Monday, May 21st at 7 o'clock, 7:05 down in Round Rock. I sent out an email this last week, and Sandra, thank you very much for sending it out. And two things. First of all, the game is with the Iowa Cubs. If we got any people from Iowa, we'd like to cordially invite y'all to support the Iowa Cubs. Also, Don Barley asked me to please make the announcement that it will be $1 hot dog night and $1 soda night. So, and plus free tickets to the game. Now, at this time, the church van is not in operation and it's unavailable to get will not be available to get members to the ball game. We are trying to find a van, but we've pretty well given up on that. We've checked with 3 Methodist churches in the immediate area, and none of them have a van. And we did talk to the Westland, and the Westland said no way. Said their insurance liability will not let them have any outside activities. It must be directly involved with them. So we're going to carpool, and we've asking people to sign up. And if you'd like to go to the game, sign your name, how many people are going. If you can drive, it says we'll drive my car. You'll hit a check mark over there. If you can't drive, just sign up, and we'll pass out the tickets around Sunday, May the 13th, and Sunday, May the 20th. But anyway, if we've already got 7 cars lined up, we'll probably end up with about 9 cars. We'll meet up here at the church, so we should have plenty of transportation. Those of you that do not drive at night and would like to go to the ball game, we will have transportation available. And so I'm going to start this around. If you would sign up, we hope that you'll go to the baseball game. And we again thank Mary Beth Burns for purchasing the 40 tickets. And if you'd like to go, please sign up.
I do have 2 brief announcements. First of all, I just want to call your attention that next Sunday is the 5th Sunday. That means that the Administrative Council will be meeting across the street. And for those of you who would like to go over and attend and get familiar with the church program, you're certainly invited. On the other hand, I want you to know that next Sunday is going to be an important Sunday school lesson in here. It'll be the last lesson in the book that we have been studying, and that particular lesson has to do with folks our age, the elderly people, and the concerns that we have. So I've already read it. I would just simply say of all the lessons that we have taught in this series, I think that will be the most important one really for us. So at any rate, I hope that most of you will be here, but naturally, for those of you who want to go across the street, naturally, you should. Now, the Sunday after that, we're talking about two Sundays over, on May the 6th, we will not be meeting here. We will not be meeting here. So whoever has the refreshments and so on and so on, no, we will not be here. And the reason that we want is because Bruce Schrott has made arrangements that this very outstanding professor, Dr. Jack Levinson, from Perkins Seminary, professor of Old Testament, will be conducting a lesson upstairs, either upstairs or across the street. I don't know which. We'll know by then. At any rate, all the Sunday school classes are urged, really. Even Jim Turley has written a note urging all the Sunday school classes to attend this meeting with this gentleman. He will be in town and volunteered to come and to teach and to talk to us. So everyone is really stressing the importance of everyone going. And so we have decided, you know, that we should cooperate and go. So just keep that in mind. I'll mention it again next week. But in 2 weeks, we won't be meeting here, and I wanted you to know this. Thank you.
Is there no prayer? Do we have a prayer this morning?
Tom,
Who has the prayer? Oh, there's Tom. We didn't forget you. That's what happens when you're short. A few weeks ago, before the advent of the study that the church is currently in on concerns, worries, and fears, I had seen some psalms that I just thought about them, and they were, I don't know whether they were printed some article or something, and I thought, you know, those are the old standbys that I always have had in my life, and it fits what has since come out to be our studies and the things that the church is focusing on. So I want to talk about them a little bit this morning. I'll try to make it not too long, but when we talk about fears and concerns and troubles in the church and ourselves and so forth and so on, but that's always been there. And we talk about Korea, we talk about Washington, we talk about health care, we talk about guns, we talk about violence. It's there, it has been there. And if we talk for history and we look at the Old and the New Testaments, there was violence then, and it was somehow we got through it. I talk about maybe 10, 12 years ago now, I went to the Holy Land with a Methodist group from Austin. And one of the places we visited was a place that they called the Valley of the Shadow of Death. And it struck me that that was a chord in the Bible. And I'd like to read Psalm 23 now with our prayer. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me
all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Amen. I should say that I brought this out of an 1886 Bible. Wow. And it happened to be, believe it or not, the only loose page in the bindings of that Bible. And I pulled it out, and it was the Psalm.
Well, thank you, Tom, for that very much. Very touching, really. Mary D., it is so wonderful to see you here. Everyone in this class has been thinking about you and praying for you. And I just want you to know how happy it is to have you in our presence this morning. Well, again, for those of you who don't know, we're teaching Adam Hamilton's book, Unafraid. We're doing it in conjunction with the pastors who are also preaching on this. Now, this morning, our lesson contains 3 topics, if you will, or 3 small chapters. One of them is the feeling of being meaningless, living a meaningless existence. The second one is loneliness, which our pastor Yvonne preached on this morning. She focused in on that one, being alone and unloved. And then the third one, which quite frankly interests me the most, is called the dystopian future. Now, I'm not even sure I'm pronouncing dystopian right, because it's not, I looked it up in the dictionary to get the pronunciation. The truth of the matter is not in either of my dictionaries that I work with. So we'll just have to go with my pronunciation, whether it's correct or not. Well, it's my intention to say a few words about each of these 3, to cover the chapter, in other words, which I think is my job as a teacher. Well, Adam Hamilton begins this chapter by discussing the life and work of psychotherapist Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl, as you probably know, was a survivor of the Holocaust. All of his family died there, but he survived. And his main feeling coming out of that experience was the people who had a sense of purpose, a goal, if you will, even in surviving the day. They were the ones who survived. And the ones who had no purpose at all, well, they just withered away and died there. And so, in his famous book, Man's Search for Meaning, he states that striving to find a meaning in one's life is the primary motivational force that we have. Many of us are not consciously aware that this search for meaning is a fundamental human need. What is the meaning of my life? What is the purpose of my life? We may have a sense that something is amiss, or we may have unsatisfactory thoughts about the way that we live, and that can lead to fear and even, in fact, worse, to despair. Our writer says, I believe our deep need for a meaningful life was placed within our hearts by our Creator. The image of God seen in us is found in our yearning for a purpose greater than for ourselves. A yearning for a purpose that's greater for myself, greater than for yourself. Now that's what Barbara Bush, by the way, indicated many times in her lifetime. And it's very important for you to dedicate yourself to a purpose, to a cause, to a belief. some cause that's greater than just thinking about yourself, and some way of meaning that we would have in our lives. Now, I'm going to be reading from this book several times this morning because I think these quotations really communicate very clearly the intention of the lesson. He said, I asked two 30-year-olds recently about their greatest fears. One immediately replied, I feel a life of insignificance. Now keep in mind that this gentleman who wrote this book is the pastor of the nation's largest United Methodist Church. And so keep that in mind. It's not unusual that he would meet with these gentlemen. That I won't make a difference at all. And the other one said something similar. I fear that I'm not living up to my potential, not having done as much as I could have done and should have done to impact others and the world. Interestingly, beneath the fears of both of these young adults is an underlying belief that human beings are meant to make a difference, to somehow or another positively affect others and the world around us. This reminds us of the statement of St. Francis of Assisi, it is in giving that we receive. It is in giving that we receive. And also the paradox of Jesus, all who want to save their lives, will lose them. It's a paradox. So, what is the cause or the purpose greater than ourselves to which we are to surrender? Well, the writer says, my personal answer to that question comes from my faith and what it teaches about God's purpose for human existence. In other words, he finds his purpose in Scripture and in what God intends for us to do. According to Jesus, our daily lives are meant to be lived in the rhythm of accepting and reciprocating God's love, loving our neighbors, and pursuing God's will in tangible ways. Granted as that may sound, this mission is something that can be pursued in our day in, day out living, beginning with simple acts. I wake up each morning, slip to my knees next to my bed, and I pray, thank you, God, for today. Thank you for your love and grace. I offer myself once more to you today. Please help me to be mindful of those around me. Use me to bless, encourage, and show kindness to all that I meet today. Send me on your mission today. Every moment and every encounter throughout the day is an opportunity for you to live a meaningful, purposeful, and missional experience. I wanted to read that because it just simply points out the sincerity of the man who wrote this book, but also I think that is a perfect example of these rather grand and lofty statements that we have been reading. Now, the Westminster Confession, which is a confession, by the way, that you will find in the Presbyterian Church, it's one that Dixie and I are pretty familiar with since we were Presbyterians for probably 25 years, is best known for the question, what is the chief end of man? What is the chief end of man? And we should also say, of course, this was 400 years old, with men and women, of course. And the response is to glorify God and to enjoy Him forever. To glorify God and to enjoy Him forever. To glorify God includes giving praise and thanks to God, but it also includes living a life that is pleasing to God. It includes seeking to do justice and practice kindness. It includes looking for ways to love our neighbors and to take care of God's creation. It includes offering yourself to God to do God's will. This is for Christians the cause that is greater than ourselves. Yes, if you're just sitting around thinking about yourself and staring at your big foot, well, I just don't know if you will ever feel like that your life has purpose. This holy cause obliterates the fear of a meaningless life, and that leads to despair. Our life of receiving and giving has purpose and meaning, and all I can say is, let's choose to live it. Now, Pastor Elaine preached this morning just on one of these three, and she preached on loneliness. But I realize that there are numerous ones of you who go to the second service and did not hear her sermon, and so therefore I do feel obligated to teach it. And for those of you who were there this morning, well, please understand. It says we are wired as human beings for companionship, for people that we can share our lives with and talk to and listen to, people who care about us and enjoy being with us. Oscar award-winning Anne Hathaway, many of you know Anne Hathaway, and even what she looks like. She's a beautiful girl, a young girl, said that loneliness is my least favorite thing about life. The thing I'm most worried about is just being alone without anyone to care for or someone who will care for me. So loneliness, like fear, is a part of life. It usually passes, but chronic loneliness can have serious emotional and physical consequences. And as our pastor cited this morning, one study done in Great Britain indicates that sustained periods of loneliness can have the same impact on your physical health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So you see, it can be fairly serious. Now, the way that we live increases the likelihood of loneliness. And as she pointed out this morning, we move a lot in our lifetimes. And every time we move, as an example, perhaps across the nation or just 50 miles away, well, we lose all the friends that we have accumulated. Another way that we live is upon retirement, that whenever we retire, we leave behind all of our work friends. I recall that bothered my father. When my dad retired from DuPont, he told me that he really missed his old friends out there, that quite frankly, none of them came to see him. He lived out in the country, so it would have been a little trip. But he missed them, and so that is so very, very true. Divorce is another thing. When we divorce, we lose all the friends that we had, that we had when we were together with our wives. So, in light of these factors which play a role in developing relationships, well, how can we overcome loneliness and this fear of being lonely? Well, as he says, one way is just to force yourself out into the world. Whenever you retire, instead of just going home, Perhaps if you don't have family or good friends nearby, you could get a part-time job. A part-time job which will allow you to be with people. And of course, he talks about things like, well, Meals on Wheels, I'm thinking would be our local equivalent. The person who is receiving the food, and I have known some, aren't just grateful for the food. They're happy that this same person comes every day. And over a period of time, they get to know each other. They don't have a long time to talk, but just share a couple of things. And that person kind of looks forward to this human contact every day. So, it's just necessary for you, if you feel alone, to become part of a group or to do something to be with people. Now, I must confess to you, you may not believe it, but really I am an introvert. I realize none of you believe it, but that is the truth, and Dixie can tell you that. But I will have to say to you that perhaps the thing I look forward to most all week is coming here and being with you. Just walking in this door and having those greeters there, and walking in here and seeing everything, and listening to the fellows relate stories, most of which are not true. Just gives me a feeling of warmth, and this is the highlight of my week. And so being with each other, being with you each week means so very, very much to me. Let's see what my watch here is saying. In Matthew 9 and in Mark 2, we recall the story of the man who took a friend to Jesus. They had to come through the thatch roof and put the man down in front of Jesus to ask for his prayer. Nowhere in those two scriptures do we read that the man cared or would have done anything or would have gone to see Jesus. He didn't think Jesus, but his friends did. His friends did. And because of their faith, the man was healed. And we all need friends like that. So much for this matter of loneliness. My sense is the best answer I could give is get busy in the church. This church, as an example, has so many programs and always so many needs for people, for volunteers. And in all of these groups that you could go and work in, it would be a blessing because you will be with other people. And so look around at the various activities and the groups and the opportunities for service, and I think, quite frankly, that would be at least part of your answer right there, if not all of it. Now I'm going to come to the part that I found most interesting. And I don't care if I'm mispronouncing a dystopian future or not. It's the opposite of utopia. Utopia means the perfect way, the perfect future, the perfect life, the ideal future. This means, on the other hand, the opposite of that, the opposite. Here is a statement from Stephen Hawking. You all know him as being the brilliant British physicist who was terribly crippled and had the worst physical problems I suppose you would have. He recently died just within the last couple of weeks. This is his statement. We face awesome environmental challenges: climate change, food production, overpopulation, the decimation of other species, epidemic disease, acidification of the oceans. We are at the most dangerous moment in the development of humanity. Pretty bleak future, right? So this was his belief shortly before he died. Many of us do fear the future of humanity. Humanity on earth. Now we see this in the novels that we read. And we see this in the movies that we see. It's there, that fear. They tap into our deep-seated fears about the future. Ted Koppel, who is very well known on television, is a newscaster and recently said in a book entitled Lights Out, a cyber attack, a nation unprepared, surviving the aftermath. And the point of the book is to point to a threat of attacks on our power grid. Now, some of you might know quite a bit about this, but an attack on our power grid would, if it were successful and large enough, would paralyze this nation. And we're talking about everything from communication to transportation. That would mean how airplanes fly and trains would run. It would mean it would affect all of life. Now, as you probably know, Russia has been into this already. There have been occasions recently where the Russians have, in a minor way, affected our power grid. And this is Ted Koppel's fear. In just a moment, if any of you have a comment on that, I want you to speak up. I want to talk to you about Elon Musk. We're thinking about the fellow who has built the Tesla automobile, the automobile that's all electric. It's still, in fact, not completely perfected yet. And also the SpaceX. He's working on a rocket to go to, I think, to Mars, if I'm not mistaken, to Mars. He is a very brilliant, innovative type of a man. And he has been warning about the danger of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence, and how in the future that this technology could lead to the end of humanity itself. I'm interested in this matter of artificial intelligence. I know a little bit about Microsoft, quite frankly, simply because Dixie and I have owned shares in that company for many years, and have made more than just a little money, thank goodness. It kind of offsets all the ones that went the other direction. But at any rate, Microsoft recently has changed their organizational system so that their work in developing and marketing your computer that sits in your house, some of you at least, they have shoved that down the organizational chart. And to make room for a new top tier organizational plan. And what is it? It's artificial intelligence. That is what they see their future being. Now, it so happened that, so that of course got my attention. It so happened that very recently in the Statesman there was an interesting article about Musk and that he warns that artificial intelligence could be an unstoppable, immortal dictator. I want to read to you a few statements from this newspaper article to support the book. Really, the book doesn't go into this very much at all. And in fact, I've pretty well told you what it says, but I want to bring this artificial intelligence out a little bit more. Now, the billionaire inventor and Telsa chief executive who believes artificial intelligence could help trigger the next world war has issued another warning about super intelligent machines that could come to dominate the world. Those supercomputers could become an immortal dictator from which we would never escape. And so he warns this in a new documentary entitled, "Do You Trust This Computer?" He goes on to say that he joins a group of growing, a chorus of experts warning that intelligent machines are already fundamentally changing our society by amassing personal data, advancing science and medicine, beginning to create new forms of superintelligence. We are rapidly heading towards digital superintelligence that far exceeds any human. I think that is very obvious, he says. Artificial intelligence already helps us to live longer and enhance efficiency in numerous industries, but these experts argue that humans are already losing their grip on technology, giving it power and abilities that humanity may never ever be able to reclaim. And so it's going to affect our lives in ways that we can never even imagine right now.
Ken?
I don't know about you, but I found that extremely bothersome, and I wanted to bring it to your attention. He brings it up, but I wanted to add a little bit more to it. Joe, Pastor Joe.
Ken, to me, the artificial intelligent threat is not so much invasion of privacy, though that would be a concern, but the negation of any kind of moral and ethical motivation.
Absolutely.
And I think that's where our threat is.
Yes.
And that threat can also be upon us, not just in artificial intelligence, but in human intelligence as well. And we've seen a lot of examples of that. And I think that's where that is leading us, and that's what my greatest fear is.
Well, thank you for that. I really appreciate that and certainly agree with you. The whole point about artificial intelligence is, and indeed the way we have gotten to this situation, is that it's helpful. It's done a lot of good. As an example, they mentioned medicine. But on the other hand, there will come a time that we realize that it's not all good and that indeed it's very threatening, according to this gentleman and others. Do we have any more comments on either this matter of the power grid or artificial intelligence? Do we have anyone here who knows a lot more about it than your teacher? And yes, of course.
If you want, that's a subject you can go on for a long time. But there is a book written by the same gentleman that wrote the Da Vinci Code. It's
Yes.
called Origin.
Yes.
And that's in the same genre that you're talking about, and it does refer to a lot of things. Some are here, some are not. Even common names like Uber's, cars, many things. But it's an interesting novel, but it does talk about a lot of these things that are out there.
Good. The author of the Da Vinci Code. Well, let me then bring this to a conclusion. Really, he, the author, really doesn't really have an answer to these three problems that he brings up. I was a little surprised that Hawking and Koppel and Musk, that they have certainly given us plenty to be afraid of, but he doesn't really approach each one at all directly. But what he does do is just simply point out that we Christians do have some response to it. Let me see if I can find it. Yes. We do have this response. He says that the important thing for us to realize that God is still God. And Revelation, the book of Revelation, ends by taking readers back to the first part of Genesis, to the Garden of Eden, where the Bible begins. And it paints a picture of the climax of human history. In the end, Eden is restored. And he simply quotes Revelation in this way. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the former heaven and the former earth had passed away. I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "Look, God is dwelling here with humankind. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people." Now, this reminds us that the biblical message is that the dystopian vision that we have and the dystopian realities we sometimes experience will never have the final word. Though paradise was lost in the opening chapters of the Bible, the Bible ends with paradise restored. In the end, God, goodness, love, and life will ultimately prevail, even if for a time evil, destruction, and death may seem to have the upper hand. I think that is what we as Christians and God-fearing people have to stand on. Well, so today we have touched on the fears of our lives having little or no meaning, or being alone, embraced by loneliness, and also our future, the threats to all humanity. But as we face all of these, Pastor Adam Hamilton urges us to be unafraid, to face the future with courage and hope, based on our faith and our belief in God Almighty. Amen.